Big compound movements followed by isolation movements is one of the most time-proven training modalities for just gaining size and muscle. Hey everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about this today. And yes, I'm aware this is a bit of a beginner topic, but I'm also trying to reach out a little more to beginners instead of just advanced lifters. I'm kind of one of those channels that has a long history of putting out a lot of info for advanced people, advanced goals, but I think it's also important for us to keep in mind the majority of people coming into the fitness world are relatively new to training. Most of your audience out there is going to be in their first year of actual any form of serious fitness or lifting. So, that being said, I think that we do need to understand this concept, and we even address it for more advanced lifters who want to try things like pre-exhaustion as intensity techniques, which is actually really ineffective based upon all the research. But I digress. Back over to the main point. Heavy work followed by pump work is one way to look at it, but more specifically, we could really discuss the whole idea of big compounds followed by isolation movements. And examples you'll see in the background of this video, you'll see me doing some heavy benching. Then you'll see me doing some incline dumbbell pressing for higher reps like 10 plus, and then I do some incline flies for my chest. Same thing, you'll see me do pull-ups and then a couple types of curls, like barbell curls, dumbbell curls. So what we're looking at here is, in this case, obviously back is being worked, but we're looking at biceps, doing big compound and then two isolation movements for biceps. The other is pectorals, right? Really big barbell exercise, then still a big dumbbell exercise, and then finishing up with an isolation movement. So people will kind of get into that question of, well, why do that? Well, a lot of it has to do with exercise economy. Our compound movements will put the most muscle on us. Okay, and we do need to be clear on that. If you were trying to gain muscle, just overall muscle, big movements on a set per set basis will put more muscle on you than the small ones. In other words, if you look at all the muscles involved in that bench pressing, obviously a ton of stabilizers get worked hard, but let's just discuss primary movers, muscles that get direct tension. Well, the chest, in fact, it's the entire chest. All right, the studies show that even the upper chest get worked on the bench, the lower chest, middle chest, everything. Okay, so this idea people have that it's only working the lower and it doesn't work the upper, no, it's actually really balanced. It works the anterior deltoids, the front delts. There will be some splash over to the side delts, triceps, particularly lateral and medial head of the triceps. That's the part on the lower half near the elbow, right? The bigger head up near the armpit is the long head. Now, the long head does get worked on the pressing, just not as effectively as on an extension, right? So again, I know there's some nuance there for beginners, and beginners don't need to worry about all that. I would say for most beginners, if you want bigger triceps, just do pressing and do an extension of some type, you'll be fine. Rope press down, a dumbbell extension, whatever. Be okay. All right, but as far as the chest goes, that's what we're working. That incline dumbbell, a little more nuanced. It actually works a little less tricep, a lot more focus on the upper chest, and even more focus on the deltoids. Then you go to that fly. What does that do? Well, that really puts us into a stretch position, doesn't it, for the chest? It is almost entirely a pectoral movement with a little bit of front delt, and it puts a deep stretch on the pectoral, particularly the upper part, the clavicle portion of the pec major, and then it will work the pec minor to a very large extent. So when you look at that, we say, okay, so what we're doing is it's a big movement, works a lot of muscle, and then we're coming down and refining the chest more. Okay, all the way down until we're getting to an exercise to where there's no chance of the triceps limiting you, because we could say on some of the big movements, we might hit failure with only one muscle, and that muscle will probably get the most stimulus. We also are not always going to work every head of that muscle effectively. Okay, perfect example when I discussed the triceps there, right? I pointed out the big movements will work certain heads of a muscle. They'll work the whole thing, but certain heads will grow more than others. Some of the smaller movements work a different portion of that muscle. And when I say work it, meaning it's measurable in the lab. So the triceps is a perfect example in the lab of where studies have shown that the lateral head grows more from a bench press than it does from a tricep extension. But the long head grows more from the tricep extension than the bench press. And when you do both, like they measured it, and what did they find? If they're looking at tricep growth, they measure just bench press, they measure just tricep extensions, and they measure doing tricep extensions, then bench press, and then bench press, then tricep extensions. Which one do you think produced the biggest triceps? The fourth one, right? When bench press was done first, the big heavy movement, followed by the tricep extension, the laying extension, what happened? Out of all four groups, that grew the biggest triceps. Okay? It worked better than doing just a big movement. It worked better than doing just a small movement, although each of those worked a different head more. And it did more than doing the small movement followed by the big movement. Okay? And we run into the same issue. So look, that pre-exhaustion, it almost needs its own video. The problem with the pre-exhaustion is it doesn't work the muscle you want more. People will get this idea like, well, I'll get the benefits of the big movement and making sure the other muscles aren't a limiting factor using less weight. So if I pre-exhaust the whatever, tricep, pre-exhaust the bicep, I'll make sure I get really big triceps and no chest. Some people try to pretend like they think it'll make the chest work harder. No, in those studies, the chest and the triceps grew less. Although the triceps barely grew less because they did get work twice. But they still didn't get as much growth as if you did the big movement first. And then the pecs grew a lot more. Okay? So when it's studied, pre-exhaustion falls flat. But what tends to work consistently is the big movement followed by the small movement. I mean, this has been studied to where a hip hinge has been done followed by some sort of knee flexion, right, for the hamstrings, right? So some sort of deadlift and then like a seated hamstring curl. They grew the biggest hamstrings because we ran into the same thing. The upper 2/3 of the hamstring grew more from the deadlift type movement, and the lower third grew more from the isolation movement. So proximal versus distal. When they were combined together in that order, what do you think happened? Well, they got the best hamstring development. Okay? So again, this has been repeatedly shown in the lab that these old school bodybuilders had it right, who always trained that way 50, 60 years ago. They figured out back then, man, I just got to grow faster if I do it this way. It's time proven. It's laboratory proven. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.